China already has one of the world's all-time lowest consumption as a share of GDP ratios. It's somewhere in the 30s. By comparison, the U.S. is in the 70s. Now, you can argue the U.S. is maybe a little high, but still, there's a long way to go. So getting China's consumers to start consuming is one of those big opportunities. And the good news is the kids want to buy stuff. The so-called Generation 2 consumers, people who are under the age of 25 today and are growing quickly, that segment of society is, first of all, rich. Relative to their parents, these are the ones who have the money. And secondly, increasingly inclined to spend it. And so we think that those G2 consumers by the mid-20s, 2020s, they will account for 30, 40% of consumption spending. So now where does China go from here? Well, the first thing is, of course, China's still growing, and there's still a long way to go before China becomes world-class in terms of infrastructure productivity. Logistics costs as a share of GDP, the amount of cost that it takes you to ship something from A to B, including the cargo and including the financing and including the administration. In China, that's about 12 or 13% today. It's down from 14 or 15. But by comparison, the United States is about 5. So there's a long way to go before China reduces its logistics costs to the level of the continental United States. How does it do that? Well, it does a lot, again, through investment, whether it's in high-speed rail, which is perhaps the single biggest investment and the most visible one, or metros, where China is going to be building over 40 city metros over the next 10 years. It's an incredible investment, which will only pay off in 30, 40, 50 years through greater productivity of the city. So these kinds of things are great upsides. They're great upsides for the medium term. In the short term, they represent a large allocation of capital, which in turn needs to be done as productively as possible. Government is going to have to also rethink its role in society. That's partly because government per se has been very good at getting things done, but nobody really asked the question, how well are they doing it? Now there's this real challenge to government to do more with less. There is going to be a slower growth in tax revenues. There's going to be a greater cost to the services it provides. It needs to rethink its own processes. Secondly, government also needs to think about how is it going to work together with the private sector and more broadly civil society to deliver the next wave of productivity. Productivity which can only come through greater innovation, by providing the sources of that innovation to the private sector, and by working together to build the long-term assets, both physical and virtual, that are needed for knowledge to disseminate throughout the economy. So the government is going to have to rethink the playing field with the private sector.